Hello everybody, Andrew Sampson with Ross Video again, and today we're going to work on a continuation of a previous video that you've probably seen, and if you have not yet watched it, you should watch it first. I can't stress how important that is, or else some of this stuff won't make any sense. So please watch the Excel Datalinq video, which goes over the new Datalinq features as they pertain to Excel, and also how to create Datalinq keys, because we're going to use Datalinq keys in this video to explain a concept where we're using a new feature called a Datalinq macro. All right, so the macros that we're going to use are going to expedite this process even further, but first get an understanding of how Datalinq keys work, and this will all make a whole lot more sense. So this is a direct continuation of that video. So basically we're taking that project that we had previously Datalinked, and if you look at our template that we're working with, we've got our name, and they're reading from a data source, and they're reading from our roster Datalinq file, which in this case is an Excel file that we've added as a database with multiple tables. We also have our Datalinq keys already set up, so if you look at our scene object, in the Datalinq keys tab, you're going to see a Datalinq key called Jersey, and it currently has a default value of 1. So what we're going to work on today is using something called a macro, and a macro is a way that we can basically quickly search for a specific value based on another value. And we're going to use, specifically in this example, we're going to use our take ID that we generate in sequence to search for a specific record number in our database. So previously, when we were just using the Datalinq key, we were changing this Jersey Datalinq key on our take ID. So we'd take our graphic, we'd drop it into our sequence. In our Datalinq key, we'd type in the record that we want to find, so record 2, and you'll see that the data changes, the headshot changes, and we find player 2. But what if we want to use another value to generate this same record, but we want to use a different value to find that value, or to get us to that value. That's where these macros can come in handy. And if you look at the template data tab, if you right-click inside the field where you type in your text or insert your value for your Datalinq key, there's an option that says Insert Macro, and there's a few different macro types that you can use. One that we're going to focus on today is the rel ID macro. And what the rel ID macro does is it basically generates a record number based on your take ID's value relative to the group ID value. Right? So we're basically doing simple subtraction here. We're taking the take ID, we're subtracting the group ID, and we're going to use that value as our key value to search for the correct data. Right? So it's important to work in specific ranges, and it's important that you set up the numbers correctly so that this all works out for you in the end. But once you get it set up, it's really, really quick, and you can very quickly build out a roster in no time at all. So the numbers you choose to use are totally up to you. I mean, whatever makes sense. But in this particular case, I've made a group, and it's called roster, and I've given the group an ID of 100. Now, we've also given our scene a template ID, which is 101. And this is actually very useful for another new feature that we've added, which allows you to insert a take ID to your sequence using the template ID value. So at any point while you're in sequence mode of expression, if you hit Control-I on the keyboard, it's going to pop up the Insert New Take Item window, and you can go and type in a specific template ID, and then you can say, I want to generate from template ID 101, I want to generate take ID 120. And then you'll create a take ID 120. So a very quick way to insert graphics into your sequence, and kind of goes hand in hand with what we're going to do with this rel ID macro in sequence here. So we're going to delete this guy again. Or actually, let's just change its number back to 101. So we'll go Control-R if you want to renumber a take ID. So 101, and we'll change that to 101. So basically what we want to have happen, our group ID is 100. Our take ID is 101. 101 minus 100 equals 1. So if we're using the rel ID function, we're going to wind up with record 1. So what we can do is inside our Datalinq key, if you, instead of inputting a specific value, you right-click and you insert a macro, and you use the rel ID macro, get rid of that 1, the rel ID macro, we're going to search for player 1, all right, because we're subtracting the group ID from the take ID. And now all I have to do is copy and paste my take ID. So if I go Control-C, Control-V, copy and paste my take ID, it automatically goes and finds me record 2 because we automatically incremented the take ID from 101 to 102, and 102 minus 100 is 2. So there's record 2. So pretty straightforward. And to make things even easier, if you want to build out your entire roster and you know that you've got 30 records, we have a duplicate function. So if you right-click on a take ID and you say duplicate and you want to make just 20 copies, you have now 20 duplicates, and each one is going to be a different player. And you'll actually see the information changing here in the graphic. I don't have headshots for all of these players, so the headshots may not necessarily change, but once we get up to the first few records, you'll start to see the headshots change. So there you go. And that's how quick and easy it can be with the relative ID macro. Now, to make it even easier for you, I manually input this macro from the template data tab inside of Sequence. But you can pre-build that macro into the template itself. So if this is something you are 100% sure you're going to use to find the correct record in your database, and you don't necessarily want to have to change this from the Sequence interface, you can build this into the template. So I'm going to make another group, and I'll just call this roster 2, just to show you the other example of how this can work. So we're going to go back to layout. We're going to go to our Datalinq key that we created. I originally put in a Datalinq key called Jersey, and instead of putting in a generic value like player 1 or player 2, I'm going to put in my macro. So we're going to say %rel_id %, so that every time I add this into my sequence, I'm going to wind up with that relative ID macro in each one of my take IDs. So all I have to do in this particular case is we'll make a group ID now, this time it's 200, and we'll drop in our take item, and we're going to change its take ID to 201, and it's going to go and find me player 1. And if we copy and paste, now we have player 2, and copy and paste, or if we duplicate, but I didn't have to go and manually type in the relative ID macro or manually insert the relative ID macro in the take ID. So you can do this from both ends of the spectrum. You can insert these macros from layout, or you can insert them from the sequence side. Now you can use these macros in a bunch of different ways. Let's say, for instance, I didn't want to rely on the group ID to get me the correct macro, or to get me the correct record number. I can write my own custom formula, essentially, to get me the correct record number. So instead of using rel ID, you could type in basically a little equation that'll result in you getting the correct record. So let's say I have just a random group number. It's like 9,000. But the take IDs I put in that group number, I don't want to use a 9,000 numbering convention. Maybe I want to use 7,000, let's say, hypothetically speaking. So we'll drop our take ID in there. We'll give it a record number of 7,001. And instead of using the rel ID function, we're going to erase that, and we're going to insert a take ID macro, and we're going to write our own little custom formula here. Now you always have to encase your formula in brace brackets. So it's going to be take ID minus 7,000. And then we'll close our brackets around that. Which ultimately is getting us to the same place, but we're not having to rely on the group ID. We're basically saying whatever our take ID is minus 7,000, that's the record I want to return. So 7,001 minus 7,000 is 1. It's basically the same thing. And we'll copy and paste, and we get the exact same result. We wind up incrementing through our database. You can type in whatever you want. You can multiply, you can divide, you can add. Ultimately, do whatever you have to do to get to the correct record number. So really powerful feature with these Datalinq macros. So again, enjoy. And until next time, we'll see you later.